Sharing my life with Richard, my new husband, and Logan, his son, has brought a level of complexity, and choosing to spend the rest of my life with Richard has been a tough decision that involves more than just integrating our lives. Notwithstanding the unexpected developments that have occurred since my 20th birthday, it has been one of the most rewarding decisions I've ever made. As Logan was at a crossroads thinking about what to do next after finishing school, Richard left for work. One frequently found myself snuggled up with my son by myself. At the beginning, our connection felt extremely effortless, perhaps too effortless, far away, but we eventually became closer and understood each other better. Logan was considerate and demonstrated an impressive level of maturity that was commensurate with his age, which allowed us to establish a strong rapport. At first, I thought his politeness and generosity were just empty gestures. However, as time went on, I began to really appreciate them. Came up, making me wonder if there was something more going on. Something we were both reluctant to admit that. At the height of my anxiety, I was at home in the morning, eagerly anticipating a tranquil morning as I finished off my daily ritual in the bathroom. Interrupted only by the sound of Richard's absence, I sat in tranquility while the room was filled with the gentle haze of rising steam, which settled on the mirrors. It caught me unawares when Logan, especially during those peaceful times, would frequently avoid the protocol of knocking on the door to the restroom. I turned towards the door in the wee hours of the morning, after glancing in the mirror for a second. "I'm here for you, Logan. How have you been lately?" After a brief pause, I felt the slightest I apologize for interrupting, but I have to get something from the other side of the door, and I hear moving sounds. "Would you be willing to let me use the restroom for a second?" For a split second, I was scared because the steam still smelled like the room. Lan's voice exuded an aura of innocence as I embraced a delicate towel, my damp locks falling loosely off my head. Assuming that it seemed reasonable that he would want anything from me, I consented, trying to keep my voice calm during our conversation. The door swung open, and Logan gently knocked, inviting the visitor inside. He wore sports clothes and his hair was disheveled. "I need to talk to you about something important." His voice was heavy with concern, looked as if he had just woken up. After giving me a quick glance, he dashed to the closet, ready to. I saw a difference in our interactions as I stood before the mirror, urging me to reflect and locate what he was seeking for. His eyes were fixed on me for an extra few seconds as I stepped into the room, before moving on to our developing friendship. Not long after I noticed that he seemed distressed, I became worried about him, since I could see he was going through a tough time. He spoke gently while holding a jar of painkillers. I found it after he had stopped looking. Relieving pill, but instead of leaving, he stayed, staring. "I'm simply wondering whether you're getting ready for something special." As I started my day, I looked up at him, trying to keep a straight face. Why is that usually there, resting against his shoulders and the bed, in that environment? Every second, the space seemed to get heavier, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was a discernible transition in you. I was genuinely surprised by that remark. Had I undergone any change? I embraced him wrapped in the towel. She stared at him with intense intensity. Her eyes met his, whose words conveyed a profound and overpowering sense of mystery that I had not yet deciphered. "Has there been any change in me recently? If so, could you explain what you mean?" "I'm experiencing awe that has left me gasping for air." Logan briefly lowered his eyes and ran his tongue over his lips as he spoke to him more calmly than I had intended. "Before we meet again, I'm struggling to find the right phrases in that instant. I felt at a loss for words as a gulf of quiet opened up between us, and I still don't know the answer." A palpable sense of unease washed over us as the air was thick with tension, both verbal and unsaid, casting a shadow of doubt. It felt inappropriate to have these conversations with Logan, my partner's son, on how to handle the situation. As I sought to comprehend the dynamics of our developing relationship, I experienced a profound internal struggle. Logan closed the distance between us before I could find the words. As I looked at him, I could feel he halted a few meters away, staring at me, his heart racing with uncertainty over what to do next. He spoke softly and carefully. "And I'm sorry if that sounds strange. Yet lately, I've been dealing with something that I can't understand." In a flash, I was unable to. I couldn't think of anything to say and was at a loss on how to react. I must admit, I experienced those exact same feelings, a gentle tightening of our relationship, as if we were discovering a new way to connect. I began to speak, my voice trembling a little, about the transmitting our familial bonds. "Logan, I just don't get it. What's going on?" However, as I was ready to conclude, he moved in closer and delicately touched our hands. The connection was gentle and considerate, and it energized me. It was exhilarating. I watched it develop with awe and a beating heart, a sure sign that we had crossed an emotional threshold. Unanticipated barrier. Despite the fact that it had simmered for some time, Logan said, "I know it's not right," as he clutched my hand, his voice quivering with the strain of his emotions, but I was unable to contain them. As a result, his words fell flat, brought to light the tremendous intensity of the experience, which left me in profound contemplation, my mind whirling with ideas that felt his role as Richard's guardian was complicated and difficult to understand. Yet, he was still my lord. At that instant, I knew I had to break off contact with him, since the connection I had for him was so strong. Our bond caused my voice to quiver and my body temperature to rise. With a painful gesture, Logan conveyed his profound grief. In a low voice, he apologized, saying, "I'm sorry though." I spoke up, trying to find my balance, even if it occurred without my genuine aim. Without missing a beat, I hastily trailed behind him as he bolted out of the bathroom. "We can catch up later." In the midst of a flurry of emotions, guilt, perplexity, and an embrace I wasn't quite prepared to make, I delicately. I sought refuge and revitalization within the confines of my room as I shut the door. However, my heart raced uncontrollably. In my chest, what the fuck happened? How did everything happen so quickly? And what the fuck should he think about doing now? Even though nothing out of the ordinary had happened, I felt entirely bewildered and unsure of what to do next. I tried to act like everything was normal and finished the next step throughout the day. Housework handled the grocery shopping and concentrated on getting over the incident in the restroom, whatever that was. No matter how much I tried to forget Logan, his intimacy and the comfort of his contact and the intensity of his emotions, which I had never witnessed before, stayed with me, shaping my I-wed Richard, and the result was unforgettable. But it was not what I had dreamed for. Our connection, which was supposed to be simple and personal, took a turn when Logan became my stepson, happened between us, and I failed to notice it until much later. I felt a sense of tranquility because I did not hear any news regarding Logan throughout the day, but I was still unsure of how to react if he brought it up. So I avoided approaching him after all that happened. Inside me, even though I tried to push it aside, I discovered a profound longing for his presence. He seemed utterly absorbed in the other's intense stare, and the tension between us was obvious. Warmly welcomed me, his words disturbing the silence with their delicate, hesitant tone, as if it were. I reacted with a voice that quivered with passion when he approached me, making it difficult for him to come near. A surge of bitterness came over me as I woke up. He confided in me about his uncertainties. "And I didn't confident that you would return today," he said. "Yes, I simply wanted to enjoy some time outdoors." Peering out the window, he glanced, his mind wandering below the surface. He showed signs of discomfort, although he seemed hurriedly trying to come up with the ideal expression. Yet there was something, even though I tried not to let myself get distracted by my thoughts, there was something in his eyes that mirrored my own emotions. My voice betrayed my innermost thoughts, but my tone made it obvious I was caught unaware that something was amiss. He nodded slightly and said, "Okay, let's rule out all these possibilities." I frequently find myself wondering as he lifted his eyes to meet mine in a deeply moving moment, my role in our family. And there are moments when I struggle to tell you how I really feel. I know it's wrong, but I find it difficult to control my emotions, and the words he stated made me nervous, as well as an overwhelming urge to express my feelings of suffocation, anything that could stop this from getting much worse. But I couldn't ignore the veracity of his statements. There was a bond between us, something that was building up for quite some time, and it was challenging for me to accept it. Finally, I began to express myself to Logan. "You are Richard's fortress, and you emerged with a slight tremor. This feels completely impossible." His voice was thick with pain, and I felt like I trod on it, even though I understood. He drew nearer, and I could feel the warmth, but my emotions stayed the same. As his pulse rate decreased, the warmth emanating from his body drew us closer. I should have stepped back to give us some distance, but my legs felt so immobile that I just remained where I was. My heart was racing, but instead of running away, I reached out. I took his hand and felt an overwhelming connection. A comforting warmth enveloped me as I stared into his eyes. Upon noticing that his eyes reflected my own, I was overcome with a whirlwind of emotions, and a feeling of unease washed over me. Thanks to a profound longing and a burden of shame, all those feelings were freely expressed between us. Logan, delicately conveyed his want to refrain from inflicting any discomfort by delicately grazing the back of my hand, yet I am unable to keep acting like this isn't happening. I had a hard time accepting that my thoughts were all over the place. Circumstance, and as my voice drew dangerously close to a whisper, Logan moved closer. While firmly grasping my hand, he emphasized that we need to face the situation head on, but that we don't have to solve everything immediately. Instead of denying the existence of the circumstance, the words he stated hung heavily in the air between us. Given the magnitude of what was unsaid at that precise moment, I came to a profound understanding of following a protracted period of prosperity. Maintaining the facade was no longer a viable option. The strain on our relationship became unbearable over time, and after everything was said and done, it seemed as though there was no way out. Suddenly, Logan turned around and left me before I could react, deep in thought regarding the limits of our connection, in that just as I decided to plant a kiss on his neck, I delicately traced around his neck, touching, and the gravity of our recent decisions caught us unawares. Yet, I experienced a distinct emotion, a sense of tranquility instead of regret. The relief I felt when we finally resolved our long, simmering conflict was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Masks Logan looked at me, his face a mask of deep emotions, and he whispered a question I haven't heard back from him, and it was clear that his hesitance was an indication of his internal conflict. What should we do now? Thought our relationship had changed drastically. But in that instant, while holding his hand, I realized I made it clear that I didn't want to go back at that very moment. The words, but we tumbled out of my mouth before I realized they weren't the final conclusion. We will find a way forward together. When he smiled, I felt a calmness that I hadn't experienced since on that fateful morning in the restroom. We vowed to face the story's obstacles head on, regardless of their significance or evolution. When Richard was at work, Logan and I would often be home alone. Days embrace. We had settled into a soothing pattern of spending our evenings outdoors, taking part in carefree. Logan settled onto a chair, savoring the tranquil moments that blossom when two spirits share a special bond and engaging in meaningful discourse. As we leaned against each other, my heart raced with emotion at the sensation of his skin against mine. He seemed to be staring at me as I turned to face him, and his shy smile made my heart race. His voice barely audible above a flutter. "Hey, I have a question for you about your heartbeat." Whisper. "Absolutely," I responded, turning my head ever so slightly to meet his. Have you ever thought about how, seemingly mustering the courage to express his emotions, he holds his hands up? This is crucial given our situation. I struggled to inhale, my thoughts racing as my heart raced and my chest roamed aimlessly, but I opted to be quiet instead of putting thoughts into words. Recognizing the gravity of the situation between the two, I struggled to face it. I'm unsure about the sound of my voice because it was weaker than I had expected. Considering whether I own the solutions, he gently nodded, his gaze fixed downward. "I only want you to know that this is not ephemeral or temporary, okay? Your importance in my life means a lot to me. Lot to me. I often challenge myself. I know this is a difficult circumstance, and I often discover I struggled to control my emotions as the weight of your comments hung in the air, obstructing my ability to express myself. I experienced I felt an overwhelming sensation of suffocation and anguish as I faced the reality of what you said, and I genuinely worried about his welfare. I was deeply concerned about what might happen because it appeared to exceed what was considered safe. I expressed my concern for you, my family, and our future as a couple to Richard, who I felt would have a negative impact on our relationship. The gravity of the matter goes beyond our personal encounters. Richard, his voice shaking with emotion, is dear to us and intertwined with our lives in profound ways should he come across. Logan's expression grew more intense as he felt his feelings. His jaw clenched as he said, "I get it. I care about him a lot, but I can't keep ignoring the emotions that develop between us." I tried to find the correct words as he delicately nibbled on my lip. Our connection was real, but we knew there would be consequences. It was never my goal to hurt Richard in any way. Despite my reluctance to disappoint him, I couldn't deny the profound connection that was plainly standing between Logan and me. I whispered, unsure of the best course of action. But then I understood that when I peered into Logan's eyes, I saw a mix of optimism, fear, and uncertainty. I could no longer turn a blind eye to this scenario. A profound longing. He hesitated, his hand extended to grasp mine, his fingers gently caressing mine, his fingers delicately entwined with mine. the intimacy enveloping me in tranquility, reinvigorating my soul in that, as he delicately traced his finger along the surface, subtly signaling that they will find a solution. Regardless of the difficulties we encounter, he assured me that he would hold my hand as we made our way through this. At that precise moment, my fears washed over me, and a solid faith welled up within me. Though we didn't have all the answers, the chaos and doubt dissipated, and a serene clarity took their place. Not essential to have such knowledge, but having unity on this issue, and that as the sun fell below the horizon, we stood in silent contemplation, our common concerns taking center stage. The long shadows formed by the horizon gracefully moved across the yard. Day gently faded into night, accompanied by a lingering breeze and the faint sound of crickets chirping in the distance. I rested my head on Logan's shoulder, experiencing the steadiness as the day turned to darkness, the cadence of his breath, and a calmness that I hadn't experienced in a long time, despite my desire to cling on to that moment indefinitely. But the truth was ever present. Richard's coming home was imminent, and the I felt a profound discomfort at seeing him. How can I face the gay? Given our past together, how can we pretend everything is good when, in reality, we both know it's not? In the days that followed Logan, I tried to be calm and at ease, but nothing felt right all around us. Despite the fact that we were aware we had to face the harsh truth of our situation, our bond was undeniable. But I lay in bed the night before Richard came back, and the subsequent regret began to weigh on my heart. Bed, staring up at the ceiling, trying to find serenity in the middle of my relentless mental turmoil, contemplation in the tranquility of the home, where the sole ambient noise was the soft hum of the air conditioner. Starting up and stopped thinking about Logan, but getting to sleep still seemed impossible. I gently invited the individual to come inside, my pulse pounding with excitement. Logan slowly knocked, his voice laced with uncertainty, as the door opened and my words trembled gently. He spoke to you gravely after closing the door, his face betraying his concern as he needed to discuss an important matter. Silently, as he sat on the side of the bed, closing the door behind him, he felt the day's burdens encircle him, filled the room as he talked, his words carrying the weight of unspoken ideas. Gently looking down at the floor, he acknowledged the floor, shared his feelings on Richard, and he struggled to overcome the obstacles and refrain from pressuring you into making a decision. I felt a knot in my chest tightening at his sincere tone, but then he abruptly stopped speaking and began to convey his love, speaking with conviction and intensity. I can't place the exact moment when it happened, but I'm overwhelmed by I hope you can take into account my sentiments, even though I know you can't possibly feel the same way about our love. I was temporarily taken aback by the impact of his comments, which caused me to struggle to breathe. With such words, he expressed the depth of his emotions, and I always thought he felt the same way. Hit a chord with him, giving him a genuine sense of authenticity. I, too, experience a profound love for you, I said gently, letting the words go beyond my. Logan looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of astonishment and optimism. My pulse was racing, and I had to ask because I totally understand. However, it doesn't make things any easier. In that stillness, I experienced a profound stillness, and I was left I realized I had arrived at a decision, but I was at a loss for words as to how to continue the talk, to let my guard down and connect with him emotionally. I now see that my decision was motivated at that same second. I was overcome with emotion instead of rationality, and I had a tranquility. He grasped my message and accepted my suggestion with lightning speed. Embracing our emotions, we snuggled up to him and kissed tenderly. Amidst the overwhelming intensity, I made the conscious decision to fully embrace my emotions, which led to the discovery of a profound sense of peace. Everything began with such intensity, and it ended just as quickly. I can almost feel the thrill he was feeling, must have felt, and I felt it too, the second he reached out and grabbed my hand. We exchanged a look that conveyed the gravity of the situation as we stood silently. The weight of the world was on us, but he spoke gently, assuring us that we would find a way ahead. No matter what obstacles we encounter, I experienced an overwhelming feeling of trust at that very moment. Within his words, a profound assurance washed over me, despite my knowledge that a decision was necessary. With the correct response, I felt a serenity that was reminiscent of the silence that greeted Rich's coming home that morning. The tension between Logan and me was palpable as the storm loomed on the horizon, and he hung around in the as Richard's homecoming brought about changes It was as if a mist had engulfed us, leaving no way to escape. Our relationship has taken a turn that I never imagined coming, even though we were both unsure of what the future held. Unanticipatedly realized that we had reached a more profound comprehension of our intricate emotions, despite my best efforts to never let it go. It remained close at all times, and still when Richard returned, greeted with a loving hug, a peck on the cheek, and the security of their regular schedule, we reflected on our time apart. Richard seemed oblivious to the chasm that had opened up between us. The home was filled with a reassuring familiarity, thanks to his previous expressions of joy, yet behind that surface, he sensed a heavy burden weighing heavily on his heart. With every look we shared or word, we spoke to Logan about what remained unsaid between us, and Richard's reappearance only served to further complicate matters. Regarding the matter, Richard proposed that we all meet in the living room that evening after supper for an emotional discussion. I was in complete agreement as I sat on the couch, trying to force a smile despite my emotions were racing as Logan sat across from me. For an instant, our gazes met, but alas, we were stuck in Richard's head. He told us about his travels and all the things he had to take care of. He couldn't help but inform us about the reverberating sounds that surrounded him, causing a challenge for my focus in the end. Richard apologized and left for work, leaving Logan, and there was a heavy stillness as we sat in the living room after he left, engulfed the room, causing everyone to pause for a moment of deep contemplation while feeling anxious. As if attempting to hide from me, Logan stayed seated with his fists tightly clenched. Feeling a surge of remorse, I dipped my head and tried to understand. I get it. It's time we talk. This is with Richard. He ought to be treated better. He is unworthy of it. Logan stopped suddenly and came back to stand by my side. I let out a deep breath as he asked, "How do you feel about it?" The weight of my words weighed heavily on my chest. Deep down, I think it's critical that we find a way to fix this. He stared directly at me, his expression betraying the acute anxiety he's been feeling recently. Blend of sorrow and compassion, he murmured softly. "You're right. What's the big deal? Does that apply to our case?" Slowly, he drew nearer to me, and we shared a brief moment as he sat on the couch with me, his hand delicately resting on mine. He gently touched us, bringing a sense of relief as we both embraced the stillness and felt the weight of our position crushing down on us. He gently expressed his concern for my well-being as I lay down next to him, placing my head on his shoulder, and felt a comforting hug. Would prefer things to be different. I delicately conveyed my sentiments, saying that I shared yours, but it is unreasonable to continue. Assumed this mask forever, and for a time we remained there, engulfed in the stillness of. As Richard chatted on the phone, his voice occasionally echoed from the room next door, breaking the silence in the room. Seemed like the stillness just before a tempest. Knowing that we would have to face the next challenge head on Logan, and I crossed paths in the kitchen one morning as Richard was heading out the door for work. The eerie silence between us conveyed the weight of. The atmosphere was electric as we waited to speak, the words still bottled up inside. It was critical to start a discussion to figure out what to do next, but I couldn't find the right words. Snapped the silence with a resolute proclamation. Logan donned a serious face. But we sat down at the kitchen table, finding solace in one another's company, and that was something else on my mind. Our chat had a profound impact on both of us, and I found myself pausing to collect my thoughts as a result. Despite the difficulty, the scenario was extremely frightening and complex. As I expressed my emotions, my words became more hesitant and difficult. "Richard, I must insist that you recognize the gravity of the situation developing between us. Logan, since you are in charge of hold a unique and important position in my heart, and I am finding it incredibly difficult to navigate the current circumstances surrounding my marriage to your father." Logan leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, as he confided in Anna about his inner conflict. "I care greatly for you, and it breaks my heart to think about hurting you, but being a part of it is just as devastating." His remarks struck a chord with me, and I found it challenging to bear them. I felt an overwhelming need to prevent him from fleeing, and tears started to fill up in my eyes. However, there was no mistaking the gravity of our position. We needed to change course to avoid total chaos. I knelt down on one knee to halt, whispering softly, as I felt a slight wave of nervousness in my voice. "It's crucial to handle the dynamics of this connection with poise, and getting a handle on it could necessitate making room for it." Logan's expression became more muddled, and I could see the anguish radiating from his eyes. A wave of melancholy resounded in every word he spoke, as he stressed the need to put some distance between us. With a heaviness that seems to be weighing on my heart, it seems like this is finding a solution seems impossible without Richard, discovering the only way to really understand our emotions. Logan stared silently at the table in front of him for what seemed like an eternity. I could see the inner agony he was going through in his expression, which mirrored the deep conflict I was experiencing with, "I understand if you think this is the best choice. I reached out to you," he muttered as he let out a soft sigh, and tenderly grasped his hand. "Logan, the thought of being a part of it aches like hell," but he raised his eyes to show a profound sense of sincerity, emphasizing the need of being truthful with ourselves and each other. With everything in its proper place, we were able to move forward, step by step, exploring. No matter what was going on, I could feel the strong connection that had us both entangled in the web of emotions that had led us here. Our connection would remain strong, regardless of how the scenario changed that night, while I laid in bed. Even though it was late at night, I lay in bed and had a profound sense of tranquility as the house was engulfed in a calming silence. Wasn't flawless or effortless, but it felt authentic, and that was enough. Life often leads us down unexpected paths, and sometimes those paths challenge not only our morals but our understanding of love, loyalty, and longing. In this story, the tangled emotions between a woman and her stepson reflect a deeper truth, that human connection is rarely simple. When silence grows between partners and emotional needs remain unmet, the heart searches sometimes in places it shouldn't. For those of us who have lived through decades of relationships, we know the importance of boundaries, but we also know the quiet ache of loneliness, even when we're not alone. This story doesn't offer easy answers. Instead, it invites us to reflect on the complexities of modern families, blended relationships, and what it truly means to feel seen, valued, and understood. Have you ever faced a moment that made you question your own heart? Or found connection in an unlikely place? If this story stirred something within you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments or even your own story. Sometimes, just putting words to emotion is the beginning of healing.